Hey guys, this is part two of the former director of the CIA, James Woolsey's meeting about EMP and threats to the electrical grid. And remember, if you like these kind of videos and like to see more, hit that thumbs up button and that subscribe button. It really means a lot to me and helps me out a lot.
Now, one of the most important of these is electromagnetic pulse. It has been around for as long as the sun has been around, so it's been around a very long time. And every 100 or 200 years, a huge electromagnetic pulse from the sun, a so-called Carrington event, can have a massive effect on the electromagnetic sphere of the Earth. Nobody is really in charge of security for the grid, and no single intelligence with a staff that is planning how to deal with these threats as they come up is in place. They don't exist. Consequently, as vulnerabilities come about, because people take fresh looks at technology or they learn something that other countries are doing in an area of technology, we are not in a position to respond really at all, much less promptly. And that creates some very serious problems. People have begun to pay more and more attention to the vulnerability of the transformers because, as I said, the large ones take a long time to produce and aren't made in this country. And the utilities have very, very few spares. Of the 2,000 to 3,000 transformers, we probably have 5% replacement spares and max, and those are for the large transformers. Those replacements and the transformer itself are extremely large, extremely heavy. And to ship some of them, you have to take roads apart and bridges apart and on and on and on. They are Homeland Security and Department of Energy are working on a new set of far more easily transportable transformers, but they're not the very large ones that are the heart of the system. So as dangers to transformers come about, even physical attack, rifles, people are not equipped to deal with it. And as new technologies, more sophisticated than rifles, come about, much of what one tries to present to government officials and the rest is met by kind of a blank stare. Now, one of the most important of these is electromagnetic pulse. It has been around for as long as the sun has been around, so it's been around a very long time. And every 100 or 200 years, a huge electromagnetic pulse from the sun, a so-called Carrington event, can have a massive effect on the electromagnetic sphere of the Earth. Smaller electromagnetic pulses or ejections from the sun can also cause extraordinary problems. One in Quebec a few years ago, Peter Pry will remember how 1989 was so powerful that it caused many billions of dollars of damage in Canada. And the last Peter and I looked at it, I think a recent report from Lloyd's of London suggests that if that event, instead of having been focused on Quebec, were at a place on the sun that it was focused on the Boston-Washington corridor, it would have done or would do today, just initially, just the very first shock, something between 600 billion and 2.6 trillion?
Not that much.
600, it's at 0.06.
Yeah, in the hundreds of billions of dollars, you know.
Say in the hundreds of billions of dollars of damage, more than in Quebec. doesn't even account for, as far as I can tell, things like the electric grid going down, so farmers' tractors don't work, so trying to figure out how to grow food for all of us. We have about 2% of the American population growing food. We used to take 40–50% to feed the rest of us. Now it takes 2%. If none of their electrical gear works, try to imagine what irrigates the vegetables in the Central Valley of California or anything else. An electromagnetic pulse can be devastating to the grid, and it is not something that has to be, or necessarily will be likely to be, carried out by an adversary. It can be carried out by the sun. We've worried about it being carried out by an adversary for some time, and so we had the presidential aircraft and strategic air commanders' aircraft and a few key nodes in our capacity to retaliate against the Soviets with nuclear weapons that were protected from electromagnetic pulse by the way the equipment was produced, but very little. And the problem with that is that with a pulse that is generated by the detonation of a nuclear weapon, one could lose the country's grid, mainly by losing the transformers, although also each individual piece of electronic equipment that was within the right range and area would be taken out as well. So that set of problems is in a way more troubling than the possession by a country like North Korea or Iran of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles that are designed to attack a specific target, because it's very hard to attack a specific target with a ballistic missile. You have to re-enter, you have to have accuracy, so forth. But if all you have to do is detonate while it's in orbit, you launch it into orbit and it detonates, you could well have a very substantial share of the U.S. Go down from the EMP. There's 3 electromagnetic pulse types. I'll let Peter tell you about them, but one is of no great consequence. One affects directly instruments such as your car's ignition. The third mainly travels along the transmission lines and affects the grid and the transformers. But we are not well equipped to figure out how to assess dangers that may come about to the grid and take precautionary steps to deal with them. There are a few members of Congress, there are a few people in the country who have spoken out on this issue and tried to figure out how we could begin to get our arms around it. But we are behind. On the combative side of EMP, we're behind the Russians and the Chinese and quite possibly even the North Koreans, since they have relatively little electronic gear to protect. I think I would close with that by way of introduction and just say I know there are people here in the audience who know a good deal more about EMP than I do, and we certainly ought to let them speak. I wanted to try to set an overall context for the discussion if I could, and it is not a pleasing milieu within which to try to begin to work.